Massachusetts officials are broadening the investigation into a drug lab scandal. Annie Dukin is accused of admitting she faked drug sample results for 2 or 3 years. The state lab chemist is also accused of forging signatures and skipping proper procedures.
For a couple of years that she admitted it, and some 9 years when she was working in the laboratory, drug samples were not handled properly, and those drug samples were the centerpiece of convictions and charges. So that is very, very troubling and very serious.
Dukin worked for a lab formerly operated by the State Department of Public Health. She worked there for 9 years before resigning in March. The governor of Massachusetts shut down the lab soon after learning of the alleged misconduct. Investigators will now sort through tens of thousands of criminal cases to see if they were compromised. The scandal could potentially affect thousands of drugs cases handled by Dukin.
The clients who've been released are thrilled, and the clients who are currently incarcerated are skeptically hopeful that they may be released. There's also a great deal of disappointment that they were possibly convicted or enticed to plead guilty based on false or fabricated evidence.
Other investigation records showed some of Dukin's colleagues had concerns for years about the high number of samples she tested and inconsistencies in her work.
What is troubling is that she and her supervisors did not seem to understand the gravity of this at the time. And that's why we took the disciplinary action that we did with respect to her supervisor, and I think her supervisor.
Dukin hasn't been criminally charged, but the state attorney general is investigating. State police say Dukin tested more than 60,000 drug samples, covering more than 30,000 defendants during her 9 years at the lab. Nicole Grether, The Associated Press.
These materials include the notes of state police interviews with former chemist Annie Dukin. I learned about the interview of Annie Dukin the day of or the day before I closed the lab. That's why I closed the lab. You're just finding out about it. But I'm not new to this information. My understanding of this information goes back several weeks. And I think I understood the gravity of this immediately. What is troubling is that she and her supervisors did not seem to understand the gravity of this at the time. And that's why we took the disciplinary action that we did with respect to her supervisor, and I think her supervisor. But I can say that based on the information we have, and that has been developed by the investigation, the wrongdoing seems to be limited to those samples that on which Ms. Dukin was either the so-called primary or secondary chemist. Do I feel angst? Well, look, for a couple of years that she admitted it, and some 9 years when she was working in the laboratory, drug samples were not handled properly, and those drug samples were the centerpiece of convictions and charges. So that is very, very troubling and very serious. And I think but to the point about accountability that you were asking earlier, I need to understand just how broad and how deep this problem runs. Well, first of all, the class of cases that Mr. Meyer is looking at is all 34,000 of the cases that she was involved in over 9 years. I think I'm right, 9 years in the lab. So you're right. She acknowledges, I think that as she describes it, 2 or 3 years, but we're looking at all 9. And that's some 60,000 samples.